The moon of Vallis Reverie was, for lack of a better word, inconvenient. Its gravity was unpredictable, its air mildly toxic, and its mountains so jagged they were banned from poetry for being aesthetic overkill. Yet today, Vallis Reverie was draped in ceremonial satellites and decked out with orbiting banners in 14 bioluminescent languages, all heralding the same improbable event, the Interstellar Tactical Dominance Showcase. Atop one of the moon's most photogenically lethal ridgelines sat the Grand Arena, a ridiculous, floating monolith of obsidian, chrome, and nervous bureaucratic compromise. Its base was held aloft by gravity stabilizers the size of diplomatic shuttles. It glimmered like a predator's eye in orbit, hovering just above the sheer-cut cliffs and snow-drenched drop-offs. Inside, chaos had taken the shape of tradition. Species from every charted spiral arm packed the stands, each with their own hydration needs, seat adjustments, and violently differing notions of what constituted clapping. Some flicked tentacles rhythmically. Others shed emotional spores. A few disintegrated temporarily from excitement, only to recohere before the next commercial break. And above them all, turning slowly on a rotating ring of hololithium, a message blazed. Welcome, Earth representative. Enjoy your short stay. It pulsed in blood orange, then in Terran English. A polite warning wrapped in bureaucratic tinsel. The commentator drones buzzed across the arena in a poorly choreographed ballet, projecting their multilingual voices across the dome. Citizens of all neural bandwidths, the lead drone bellowed. Welcome to the 998th Annual Interstellar Tactical Dominance Showcase. This cycle, by rare council fiat, we welcome back an unranked Terran representative, yes, the plucky projectile people of planet Dirt. The crowd chuckled in 36 frequencies. One particularly large Yorthak dropped its Bettentini out of amusement. The drink devoured the floor. Down in the competitor wing, a Krulak war priest roared in prayer, his voice echoing like cannon fire in a submarine. He bore armor made from compressed hull fragments of ships he had personally dismantled. 4 ceremonial scars ran across his thorax, each a tribute to a previous foe's last breath. He was not the protagonist, but he thought he was. Above, in the VIP lattice, delegates and war sponsors swirled drinks and placed wagers through neuro-threaded visors. The betting screen shimmered with odds. Thundercleft, Krulak 1:1. Human representative, Ellie something? 8,000,000:1. Some bet out of pity. Some out of nostalgia. A few just liked long shots with poetic deaths. The announcer drone pivoted again. Before the match begins, let us remember the cultural significance of today's spectacle. In the ancient traditions of pre-expansion species, combat resolved many political disputes, primarily due to a lack of PowerPoint. Today, we continue that noble idiocy by broadcasting elite tactical engagements for your amusement and strategic recalibration. Below the orbiting dome, snow-covered ridges stretched like frozen jaws. On one of them, a small, insulated pod was half buried in the white. Inside, a human breathed slow and steady. She sat cross-legged, wrapped in exofiber camo that matched the mountainscape too well to be legal on 5 separate planets. Her name was Ellie Vance. She hadn't asked to be here, but she hadn't said no either. In front of her rested an Earth-made rifle. No laser, no plasma arc, no digital scope. Just matte black steel, hand-calibrated optics, and a long silencer etched with a barely visible inscription. Make em wonder. Ellie sipped lukewarm coffee from a packet that promised vaguely mocha. It was neither, but it was warm. Her breath fogged the air as she adjusted a dial on the side of her scope, watched the arena swell with sound and movement, and muttered to herself, "Showbiz." Back in the arena, the Krulak champion, registered name Thundercleft, birth name an auditory impossibility, raised both arms to the crowd. 4 auxiliary limbs unfolded from his spine and locked into combative posture. Cameras zoomed, drones pivoted, and one unfortunate Glink's ambassador fainted from sheer hormonal overdrive. A voice boomed, "Challenger, you have brought a bullet to a battlefield. I bring you extinction." The crowd roared. Even the vacuum-sealed diplomats who never showed emotion raised a few antennae. Ellie, meanwhile, was picking snow out of the hinge in her rifle's bolt. Extinction, she said softly. Right. Because that's how extinction works. One guy yells and everyone falls over. She adjusted her viewfinder, zeroing in not on the warrior, but on the angle of sunlight hitting his armor. It gleamed too evenly. Reflective but not just shiny, symmetrical. Factory-issued or culturally mandated, maybe. It didn't matter. Ellie took note of the high shoulders, the weight distribution, the thermal plume at the base of his spine. She turned a small dial. Wind readout adjusted. The scope shimmered with atmospheric feedback. Her fingers moved without thought. This was the part that made sense. From the arena's mouth, an armored transport, more ceremony than utility, descended into the frozen ridgeline. It carved a path down the crag like a drunk god drawing a line in marble. Inside, Thundercleft flexed and growled to himself in a voice like tumbling granite. A Krulak pageant drone broadcast his pre-fight ritual. The warrior consumes the last bite of his enemy's name, it translated. The warrior bit down on a capsule labeled Ellie, and spat metal splinters into the snow. The feed cut to Ellie's face. She blinked at the camera. Cute, she said. She wasn't angry. Ellie didn't get angry anymore. Not the burn-hot kind. What lived in her chest now was colder, older. Measured. The kind that waited for wind to drop half a second before pulling a trigger. In the arena, the countdown began. 10. The crowd dimmed the arena lights to starlight simulation mode. 9. Ambient drums began, some literal, some psychically inferred. 8. A gelatinous choir from the Zygex cluster began wailing. 7. A Gurtothan general snorted a live firefly, for luck. 6. Thundercleft activated his reflex amplifier with a visceral click. 5. Ellie scratched her ear with a gloved finger. 4. A drone hovered too close to her scope. She stared. It buzzed away. 3. A small snowflake landed on her optic lens. She blinked. It melted. Ooh. The rifle exhaled a hiss of stabilizer gas. 1. A bell chimed that hadn't been used since the first conflict showcase when someone forgot to turn off a religious artifact. Today, it was ceremonial. It echoed across the ridgeline like a verdict. The game began. Thundercleft exploded from his dropship crater with zero subtlety. His footfalls cracked the ice in neat hexagons. Snow hissed off his armor. He swung his plasma glaive in a wide arc and screamed into the open terrain. Show yourself, little Earth. Let the end begin. Ellie didn't respond. She didn't need to. She was already 700 meters ahead of him, prone behind a snowdrift, eyes on her scope. From her position, she watched the thermal flare of his anger light up her targeting display. His heat signature wasn't just visible. It was arrogant. A beacon. A declaration. She sighted in just to the right of his head. Fired. The bullet snapped past his ear, ricocheted off a rock, and took out one of the floating drones. Sparks. Smoke. Screaming announcer. Oh. A shot fired. Was it intentional? A warning? A cry for help? A glitch? Perhaps all four. Thundercleft laughed like a collapsing building. You missed. Ellie chambered another round. Yep, she whispered. The crowd leaned in, figuratively for species without spines. Their attention sharpened. The human had fired. The human had missed. Now they were invested. Bets updated. One alien placed a 1,000,000 credit side bet on first kill via accident. Another on combatant removed by snow leopard. There were no leopards. But who could really say? Thundercleft stomped across the slope, scanning wildly. His thermal dampeners kicked in too late. Ellie noted the delay. Above them, the drones began broadcasting real-time analytics, except Ellie's stats were oddly blank. No kill record listed. No rank. No weapon classification. The screen just read, Earth representative. Operator active. Data restricted. The bureaucrats shifted uncomfortably in their climate-controlled skybox. Remind me, one hissed in insectal chatter, who authorized the Earth entry again? Senator Corval. Said it'd be entertaining. She brought a rifle. It's quaint. Like fighting with rhymes. Another pause. The Krulak ambassador leaned forward. She's not using a targeting HUD? Apparently not. Then how? The sound of a second shot cracked the sky. It didn't hit Thundercleft. It hit a stone ridge behind him. From the stands, it looked like another miss. But the rock shattered in just the right way to collapse a ledge below him. Snow, ice, and alien dignity slid out from under him. He fell. Not fatally. Just enough to be humbled. The audience gasped. Some applauded. Others filed formal complaints in real time. Ellie smiled. Slippery slope, she murmured, and adjusted her scope again. Up in the arena, the announcer voice tried to maintain excitement while reloading the script. And there it is, folks. The human representative has chosen a slow burn approach. Perhaps a long game. Perhaps an experiment in embarrassment. Stay tuned. And across the system, thousands of watchers leaned closer. The spectacle had begun. The underdog was not dying on cue. And somewhere in the blizzard silence, Ellie whispered, "Come closer." The snowstorm came in like a hush falling across a cathedral, abrupt, reverent, and full of unspoken consequences. It was a dry blizzard, fine grains of ice whipped sideways with surgical precision. The kind of weather that respected no technology and forgave no arrogance. Ellie Vance shifted slightly beneath her thermal shroud, adjusting the lens cover on her scope. Each movement was precise, the opposite of hurried. Her gloves made no sound against the cold metal of her rifle. She blinked slowly, then again, timing her heartbeat with her breathing. 700 meters downslope, Thundercleft dug himself from the snowbank with the grace of a rhinoceros on fire. Each move flung snow in a 2-meter radius. He roared as if the mountain itself had insulted his ancestry. A nearby drone caught the tantrum on 26 angles. The Krulak champion has encountered mild terrain interference. A lesser warrior might take this as a sign. Thundercleft takes it as foreplay. Ellie's lips pressed into a faint line. Her scope picked up the renewed heat signature as his armor recharged. Not fully. There were fluctuations. The environmental stabilizers had taken a hit. Good. She crawled forward 2 inches, recalibrated the distance manually, and let the wind speak to her. Thundercleft marched with increasingly erratic footfalls, kicking through drifts and growling threats in 4 dialects. Some of them didn't even have grammar, just tonal violence. "You hide like a worm with a mirror," he bellowed, spinning slowly, plasma glaive raised like a beacon. "Come out, human. Face me. Or die 1,000 hidden deaths." Ellie tracked his progress. Noted the slight limp. Right leg. Overcompensating with the left. She couldn't be certain if it was exhaustion or overconfidence, but it didn't matter. Both were assets. Above them, in the warmth of the orbiting arena's control bay, Senator Corval clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "She's not engaging traditionally," he said aloud, though the statement didn't need witnesses. "She's baiting him," said the Glink's observer beside him. "Emotionally, tactically, possibly even psychologically." "She's playing with her food," Corval corrected, a note of admiration hidden behind his compound eyes. "She's human," another delegate said, as if that explained everything. Back on the ground, the blizzard thickened. Thundercleft stopped atop a rocky outcrop and let out a challenge howl that cracked the ice sheet below. Microquakes trembled down the ridge. Somewhere in the upper cliffs, a small avalanche dislodged and buried a centuries-old surveillance statue. No one noticed. In the snow below, Ellie leaned into her rifle. Wind factor spiked briefly. She waited. Counted. 3, 2. A pause in the gust. She fired. The bullet didn't aim for Thundercleft. It hit a steel support beam on a communications relay 400 meters behind him. The resulting echo split the air, sent a shockwave outward. Thundercleft spun, glaive extended, but too late. The echo masked Ellie's position by just enough. His snarl twisted into something almost confused. From the drone feed, It looked like the human was playing with geometry now. "A miss?" the announcer asked. "Or a lesson? And if it's a lesson, who's the teacher?" Ellie didn't answer. She loaded the next round and adjusted for temperature drift. Below, Thundercleft was breathing harder now. His chest plate steamed in irregular bursts. His armor's recharge rate had diminished. His anger hadn't. "I am the blade of 7 systems," he roared. "I have killed thinkers, strategists, gods pretending to be men." Ellie exhaled, soft, but not yet a girl with patience. She wasn't a celebrity. Earth hadn't sent her to dazzle anyone. She wasn't here for pride. The Council had dismissed Earth as irrelevant after the 732nd showcase, citing insufficient flair. The invitation to return had been a fluke, a pity inclusion, a diplomatic footnote with entertainment potential. But Ellie Vance hadn't come to entertain. The moment her boots hit Valis Reverie, she stopped being a pawn. She'd been a sniper in 6 Earthside campaigns before she'd ever left orbit. She'd lost more friends to bad decisions than enemy fire. She'd buried her CO after a drone strike misfire and finished the mission alone. Ellie understood terrain like some people understood language. Fluent, intuitive, sacred. And she had read the Krulak. She'd studied Thundercleft's previous fights. How he baited his enemies into emotional aggression. How his culture fetishized dominance as both display and sacrament. His battles were dances, brutal, overproduced, but full of tells. Arcs, patterns, habits. Predictable, if you weren't seduced by the noise. She chambered her next round and waited for his next boast. It didn't take long. "I do not need to find you," Thundercleft snarled into the storm. "I only need to step on you." Ellie's fingers tensed. Her shot took out the snowbank 2 meters left of him. A thunderclap, an eruption of powder. He flinched. Only for a fraction of a second. But enough. Above them, the viewership counter ticked up. Rapidly. Senator Corval leaned forward. "They like her." "Don't be ridiculous," said the Sylvanian minister. "She hasn't made a kill." "No," Corval murmured. "She's made a point." On the ridge, Thundercleft was breathing hard now. His armor hissed and whined, minor power loss alarms blinking across his HUD. He paused, glanced toward the higher ridgeline. "Coward," he called. "Is that what Earth breeds now?" Ellie's voice came over the arena speakers without warning, relayed from her suit comms. "Earth breeds survivors." The crowd stirred. The sentence wasn't flashy, but it cut. Thundercleft straightened, shoulders tight. "You think survival is glory? I think survival is truth. You think a truth will save you? I think you don't know what's coming." She was moving now. Quiet, low, shifting to a better angle. Thundercleft scanned the cliffs, muscles coiled, lips drawn back over jagged teeth. He was losing tempo. Ellie knew it. Saw the widening of his stance. The twitch in his offhand. She wasn't trying to match his strength. She was measuring it. Baiting the depth of his arrogance. Her next shot hit the base of a cliff above him. A slab of ice fractured, tilted, then dropped with the force of a meteor. It didn't crush him. She hadn't aimed for that. It penned him in, a wall of frozen mass between him and any advance. Trapped. Not forever, but long enough. Thundercleft bellowed in frustration. Slammed his glaive into the ice, tried to carve through, but it was dense, reinforced by geology itself. He turned his gaze upward, toward the sniper he couldn't see, and shouted, "I am not a rat in your maze." Ellie was already repositioned. Scope realigned. She didn't need to answer. The announcers tried to reframe. A new development. The human has, through unknown means, redirected terrain into an obstacle. A defensive move? A psychological strike? A weather-based assassination attempt? The crowd murmured. The betting screen flickered, unstable now. Odds adjusting. Uncertainty blooming like a virus. And up in the diplomatic box, the murmuring turned sharp. "They don't understand this game," the Krulak ambassador said darkly. Corval glanced sideways. "Or maybe they understand it better than you think." On the cliff, Thundercleft began pacing within his icy pen. Circling. Calculating. "You delay the inevitable," he called. Ellie lined up her next shot. This one was for the sensor on his shoulder. A direct hit could blind his left HUD quadrant. "Maybe," she whispered. "But you'll never see it coming." She squeezed the trigger. Metal cracked. His shoulder flared with sparks. Thundercleft howled, not in pain, but in violation. He'd been touched. Wounded. Not mortally, but undeniably. The crowd exhaled as one. Something ancient stirred in their bones. For the first time, the kill didn't seem inevitable. A human had drawn first blood. And not by force. By math. By discipline. Thundercleft raised his glaive high, eyes burning. "Enough games. I will find you, human. And I will end this." Ellie packed her rifle in silence. He would find her. Eventually. She was counting on it. And by then, he would be too close for his weapons to matter. He'd be in her arena. The space between breaths. The distance between fear and focus. Let him come. She was ready. The air inside the pre-battle sanctum smelled like burnt spices and bureaucracy. Somewhere between a warlock's pantry and a tax office. Smoke curled from incense globes shaped like screaming faces, each one representing a species long since disqualified from competition due to excessive enthusiasm. The walls pulsed softly with bioluminescent script, translating ancient combat laws into 400 dialects simultaneously. For Ellie Vance, it was Tuesday. She sat on a bench carved from petrified bone, alone except for the diplomatic observer, an octopoid archivist named Jilu, who was scribbling furiously with all 7 of his writing limbs while sipping tea through the 8th. "You are very calm," Jilu observed, sounding genuinely confused. Most first-time champions experience nausea, night terrors, or compulsive grooming rituals. "I flossed," Ellie replied, checking the alignment on her rifle's microscope. "This morning. Pre-ritual." Jilu paused mid-scribble. "That counts." Around them, an endless loop of ceremonial audio blared from the walls. Drums, gongs, and the wailing of a bird species that had gone extinct before discovering pants. The rite of commencement was designed to disorient, elevate, and intimidate all at once. Thundercleft, presumably, was stomping through his side of the temple, headbutting ceremonial pillars and roaring affirmations into polished obsidian. Ellie adjusted the seal on her collar. Her breath fogged slightly as the sanctum temperature dropped in anticipation of the next phase. A luminous hologram fizzled to life above them. It looked like a jellyfish made of knives and regret. "Warrior Vance," it intoned. "Do you acknowledge the right of judgment?" "I acknowledge it's happening," Ellie said. "Is that sufficient?" There was a diplomatic cough from Jilu's teapot. The hologram didn't flinch. Spoken and logged, it buzzed, flickering out of existence. With that, the walls began to shift. Not physically, spatially. The room deformed into non-Euclidean geometry for precisely 6 seconds, just long enough to transport Ellie and her escort through a tradition-bound wormhole. It wasn't the most efficient method of transit, but it was the most reverent, and reverence, on Valis Reverie, was more important than gravity. They arrived in the ritual hall of contestants. Here, both combatants would recite their creeds before battle. Not for the audience, but for the gods of performance metrics and intergalactic PR. Thundercleft was already there, glistening with ritual sweat and wrath. His chest plate bore the sigils of 4 conquered moons. His glaive had been cleaned and blessed with screaming ash. When he saw Ellie, he sneered. "You wear black," he rumbled. "Like a widow mourning her own fate." Ellie didn't rise. She nodded at his glaive. "Bit early to be compensating, isn't it?" The attending priestess, a translucent being composed of humming notes, paused mid-chant. "I shall permit the insult," Thundercleft said magnanimously. "It will taste sweeter after your defeat." "Do you rehearse these lines?" Ellie asked, stepping onto her ceremonial platform. Or do they just bubble up from the ego soup? The priestess resumed. The ritual of recitation began. Thundercleft pounded his chest and spoke in tones designed to make mountains blush. I, Thundercleft of the Krulak Dominion, invoke the strength of my line. Born of conquest, forged in fury, kissed by blades. I fight not for victory, but for inevitability. There was polite applause from the ethereal judges. One of them floated a little closer to sniff his aura. Ellie waited her turn. When the floor lit beneath her, she raised her chin slightly. I'm Ellie Vance, she said. I'm here to do a job. The silence that followed was a new species of tension. The priestess paused again. The judges twitched. The crowd, watching via orbital broadcast, leaned in collectively. And then the floor dropped. Not metaphorically. Quite literally. Ellie fell with the smooth acceleration of a well-funded gravlift, plummeting toward the arena floor like a prayer in reverse. Lights spiraled past her, flashing through species colors and advertising bursts. A final message blinked above her as the descent slowed. Begin when ready. She landed in snow. The cold shocked her, not from temperature, but from accuracy. The arena had recreated the mountain environment with alarming detail. Wind howled from artificial ridges. Powder blew across jagged rocks. A false sun glared behind roiling storm clouds. Opposite her, Thundercleft descended in a blaze of golden smoke. He landed with the subtlety of a meteor punch, his feet cracking the ground beneath him. The announcer's voice thundered from unseen speakers. And now, the final trial of glory. One human. One legend. One snowfield. Place your final bets, delegates, and keep your diplomatic immunities handy. Ellie dropped to one knee, scanning the terrain. Everything she'd mapped earlier, slopes, pressure zones, thermal sinks, was nearly identical. But now the arena had its own rules. An invisible wall, 10 kilometers in radius. Drone surveillance permitted. No orbital bombardments, as of the most recent update. And no weapon systems outside the traditional arsenal. Which meant no drones, no laser-guided shells, no automated targeting arrays. But her rifle was technically traditional. Bolt action, hand-loaded, non-sentient. The judges had argued. She had smiled politely until they relented. The horn sounded. Thundercleft moved instantly, a blur of gold and ice, charging down the incline like an avalanche wrapped in rage. His glaive spun, war screams echoing behind him. Ellie dropped flat, rolled behind a simulated boulder. The first energy arc from his weapon seared above her, cleaving a groove into the ice that hissed like a venomous snake. She reached into her belt, pulled the first round. Wind. Distance. Vibration. She aimed not at him, but to the left. A relay spire. It shattered. The shards blinded the air sensors in the quadrant. Thundercleft roared. Ellie moved again, low, serpentine, ghost-like through the snow. Her breath shallow. Every motion minimized. She was not faster. She was not stronger. But she was smarter. Another burst of heat to her right. He was angling to flank. She dropped a thermal lure behind her and dove into a crevice. Thundercleft took the bait. Slammed his glaive through the snow with enough force to send up a column of ice. The arena reacted. Sensors adjusted. Drones flickered. Commentators buzzed. A classic Krulak feint. But what's this? The human counters not with resistance, but with absence. In the control booth, Corval leaned forward. She's resetting the rhythm, he said. Unorthodox, murmured another. No, said Jilu, scribbling faster. She's conducting. Down on the field, Ellie saw her opening. Thundercleft had overextended. A half-second longer in his swing. His left side exposed. She exhaled. Fired. The round hit his shoulder plate. Not deep enough to injure, but precise enough to trigger a reset of his armor's kinetic dampeners. That gave her 4 seconds. She used 3 of them to relocate. By now, the snow was alive with echoes. The arena's design amplified each impact, creating a confusion of phantom footfalls. Ellie used them like camouflage. Thundercleft howled, spun, charged. He caught a glimpse of her. Finally, she let him. He came in fast, faster than she expected. His glaive shimmered, plasma edge arcing like a blade through the aurora. Ellie sidestepped, caught a glancing blow across her arm. Pain. Blinding, but controlled. She dropped a flash pellet at his feet. When it burst, the light wasn't white, it was blue. Calibrated to Krulak eyes. Their equivalent of a small nuclear insult. Thundercleft stumbled, snarled, blinded. Ellie rolled over the crest of a snowbank and came up behind a tree. Well, a holographic recreation of one. Good enough. She reloaded. A new round. This one designed not to kill. Just to punctuate. Thundercleft turned, half-blind, eyes watering plasma. She waited. He rushed again. She fired. The bullet struck his leg, right at the joint. His knee buckled. He collapsed forward, stunned, not by pain, but realization. He wasn't winning. He was being taught. The crowd gasped. The audio from the delegation chambers crackled with curses and recalculations. Ellie stepped forward. Visible now. Come. Thundercleft raised his head. You fight like a virus, he said, coughing. No, Ellie said. I fight like someone who knew I couldn't win your way. He looked up at her rifle. Blinked. Then, whose way is this? She tilted her head. Ours. And then she turned. She didn't fire again. Didn't need to. The battle wasn't over. But the story had changed. And in Valis Reverie, stories were the only thing that truly survived. Under the indigo sky of Thranta 4, where the moons orbited like bored theater critics, the arena still echoed with the clang of laughter. But it wasn't the usual kind, the boisterous, betting table variety. This was stunned silence attempting to backpedal into disbelief, failing, and crashing into a wall of reality. Somewhere in the crowd, a Charn ambassador vomited his viewing slime, which, for his species, was considered both grief and a formal diplomatic statement. Ellie lowered her rifle. Not a weapon of mass disintegration. Not the quantum splitter with its pompous 4-syllable firing mode. Just a human-made bolt-action precision rifle, designed centuries ago by people who still believed in things like windage, gravity, and lunch breaks. The arena's announcer, a 3-jawed helium-voiced slug named Glurn, tried to form words through a tongue unaccustomed to admitting error. That is to say, the match is concluded. Ellie glanced at the colossal mound of twitching exoskeleton 20 meters ahead of her. Ogruin, champion of the Elzag Empire, herald of 50 Suns, slayer of Tharnak the Soul Eater, etc., etc., he had a lot of titles, was currently doing a remarkably good impression of a sentient beanbag chair with a hole through his cranial node. It was, in a word, quiet. Until the feed caught up. 100 billion sentient viewers across the galaxy, all of them tuning in for the ceremonial humiliation of the lone human contender, began to scream. 1,000 species in 1,000 tongues cursed, protested, flailed, demanded replays, slow-motion analysis, bribery records, blood tests, spectral imaging, divine omens. None helped. The playback showed the same thing. Ogruin lumbering forward, arrogant and untouchable, ready to crush the tiny human beneath a claw the size of a snub fighter. Ellie kneeling, calm, breathing out. A single shot. No blaster flash. No gravity-ripping pulse. Just a supersonic whisper that caught the warlord mid-threat, severed 3 neural spines, and dropped him before the second syllable of "die, ape" could make it out of his tusked mandibles. Glitch in the feed, someone shouted from the Imperial skybox. Remote sabotage, said another. This is human propaganda. A Rinthian noble with 12 legal degrees in war broadcast ethics slammed his viewing pod shut and simply whispered, "Oh no." Ellie turned and walked toward the edge of the arena, rifle slung loosely, gaze level. No celebration. No smirk. Just the quiet focus of someone who had lived inside this moment for far too long. At the arena's edge, Mach, her handler, technically her assigned observer/babysitter from the Galactic League of Fair Contests, met her with eyes wide, hands trembling. His fur had turned a paler shade of mauve. You killed him. That was the idea. But Ogruin can't die. His skull has 14 plates. You can't shoot through it. I didn't. I went under it. 17th joint. Nerve junction. Seismic instability from his left foot gave me the lean. Mach made a sound like a deflating thought balloon. But the League, the Imperial Accords. You've thrown the entire betting economy of Sector 8 into turmoil. Ellie raised an eyebrow. Should have bet on the girl with the gun. The galactic bureaucracy, which normally moved with the enthusiasm of a molasses glacier, responded to the incident with the urgency of a species discovering fire in its own pants. Within 10 minutes, a protocol emergency was declared. Within 20, delegates from 14 systems filed formal protests. The human delegation, consisting of 3 exhausted Earth diplomats and a legal intern named Raj, were hastily summoned to the inner conclave chamber and accused of cultural deception, kinetic heresy, and 1 count of breaking the narrative. Ellie declined to attend. Instead, she returned to her quarters, barely more than a supply closet with military sheets, and cleaned her rifle with the precision of a monk tending sacred relics. It was, in a way, sacred. Her grandfather had given it to her. He had trained snipers during Earth's final analog war, long before the planet was offered galactic integration in exchange for not talking so much during council meetings. Outside her door, chaos bloomed. Some claimed the shot had been psychic. Others argued Ellie was a cyborg, illegally enhanced. The Elzag Empire demanded her brain be dissected. The League suggested instead a gentle mental interview via dream siphoning, which, in practice, was just dissection with softer music. Ellie sipped her tea. It tasted faintly of synthetic mint and burnt metal, which was a fair summary of galactic hospitality. Her door chimed. Raj poked his head in. The poor intern looked like he'd aged 3 fiscal cycles in an hour. They want you to speak at the tribunal. Pass. They might send the deciders if you don't. Let them. I've got nothing to hide. Raj hesitated. Ellie, was that even your best shot? She looked at him for a long moment. No. Just the cleanest. Behind Raj, a dozen ambassadors were having very public meltdowns. A gelatinous ambassador from Dern wept salt through his pores while demanding reparations for the emotional distress of watching a legend die in such an unflattering posture. The conclave descended into screaming matches, holographic shoving, and at least 1 duel challenged by interpretive dance. In the center of it all, the League president, a gas-filled vertebrate with a permanent sigh, raised his speaking node. Let us be clear, he intoned. This human, this Ellie, has violated the spirit of the games. She did not triumph with honor, but with trickery, mathematics, patience. A horrified murmur rippled through the chamber. Patience, in galactic warfare, was considered a war crime in at least 3 cultures. But she abided by the rules, said the human ambassador, forehead gleaming under the lights. She used no enhancements, no banned tech. She aimed. She fired. She hit. It's not about that, screeched a Zarn emissary. It's about expectation. Narrative. She didn't even monologue before the shot. Ellie wandered into the chamber. No fanfare. Just boots on marble, eyes sharp, rifle slung. High. 1,000 eyes turned. And blinked. Are we really doing this? She asked. The chamber, for the first time in memory, fell completely silent. I signed your waivers. I respected your rituals. I sat through your pre-fight pantomimes where the other guy got to wave flaming skulls and yell about eternal glory. I waited. I aimed. I fired. You don't like how fast it ended? Don't blame the shooter. Blame the pacing. The Solari matriarch rose, her shell clicking with suppressed fury. You humiliated him. No. He humiliated himself by assuming I was weak. I just corrected his conclusion. Mock, who had followed her in like an anxious shadow, stepped forward. You don't understand. You've disrupted centuries of tradition. Ellie shrugged. Maybe some of your traditions need disrupting. A slow ripple of thought passed through the room. Even among the furious, a few couldn't help but ponder. She had broken no rules. She had shown no ego, no boast. Just precision, control, power without the spectacle. Then what do you propose? Said the League president, voice creaking like old leather. Ellie met his gaze. Next time, make your champions think. Or don't put humans on the list. That, at last, silenced even the loudest among them. She turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and someone should tell Ogruin's next of kin. His last words were about my primitive rifle. You might want to start teaching sarcasm in diplomacy school. She walked out. Somewhere behind her, a clerk quietly began drafting the first interstellar motion on human combat restrictions. It would pass. It always did. But that motion, unlike Ellie's shot, would be slow, flawed, and miss the target by several light-years. The mountain range from which she had trained, the one humanity had used as her proving ground, remained empty now. But the legend had already begun to ripple. Not in the corridors of power, but in the minds of quiet soldiers, underestimated recruits, tired veterans with steady hands and long memories. The kind of people who knew what it meant to aim, breathe, and pull the trigger not for glory, but to make a point. Ellie didn't need statues or medals. She had a story. And in the galaxy's heart, that was ammunition enough.